Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to our stream today. Thank you so much for coming aboard. Once again, here we have a really exciting roster of news announcements to talk about. We are weeks away from the end of Marvel Comics' Krakoa storyline coming to an end for the X-Men line of comic book titles. I am super excited to go ahead and jump into the penultimate month of the X-Men's Krakoa line of comic books. Plus, we are also going to talk about the impact that the Blood Hunt storyline is going to have across Marvel Comics' entire line of titles here. There's so many comic book tie-ins that Marvel just recently announced as part of the Blood Hunt storyline. And thankfully, we have some characters that we haven't seen in quite some time who are just bubbling back up to the surface here with Midnight Suns and Union Jack. So I do think, thankfully, even though I'm not super excited for everything in store for for Marvel's Blood Hunt, there's still a lot of comic books that do seem really interesting. A lot of interesting off the beaten path characters coming back into the mix. But frankly, what's a lot more exciting for me, though, are some of these solicits for the last couple X-Men titles. Today, we're going to be talking about the last couple installments of books like Cable, X-Men, and X-Men Forever. Frankly, the closer we get towards the end of the Krakoan era of comics, the more excited I am to check out some of these books here. So I really think we have a lot in store for the stream today. Thankfully, we also have some content over for Ultimate X-Men that we're going to explore a little bit later on in our stream. We're also going to touch a little bit on the recent launch for the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver series that recently came out from Marvel Comics. I think that one actually flew a little bit under the radar here with so many recent releases and with all these like disparate X-Men comics coming to an end. I did have a chance to read that series written by Steve Orlando, illustrated by Lorenzo Tometa, and I did think there were so many just fantastic moments between Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver over in that series. I also really appreciate some of the artwork from Lorenzo Tometa. It's really interesting to see Tometa's artwork outside of the context of Sarah Pichelli, who really assisted during the last run of the core Scarlet Witch series. Also, one more thing that I think is really cool about Marvel Comics' Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver series is the fact that this comic book title is even tied into the X-Men line of titles ever so slightly, with some of those plot threads recurring over with Magneto here. So really interesting that there's even some Marvel comics outside the line that are referencing what's going on right now over in terms of the core Marvel universe with the X-Men titles. Plus, elsewhere, some of these other Marvel comics are also set to tie in over to the Blood Hunt storyline as well. So there's so many comic books to talk about today over in the month of May. And plus, I think one of the things that is just on the horizon here is this upcoming relaunch over for the X-Men comics that is set to happen over in June. So much to talk about over on the stream here. We're going to kick things off today by talking a little bit about Blood Hunt and previewing some of these latest issues over for the X-Men's Krakoa in the lead up to some of those final series here. Without further ado here, I want to officially welcome you over to our stream today. We have so much to talk about here with the final couple moments of the X-Men's Krakoa line of comics. Plus, we're going to touch on and really explore the Blood Hunt line of comics from Marvel. Usually, I am really interested in checking out the next big upcoming Marvel Comics event, but I have to be honest, there is something about the Blood Hunt storyline that isn't intriguing me as much as I want it to. I really think that one of the issues with Marvel's upcoming Blood Hunt story is just the fact that some of those previous Marvel Comics events had a lot more lead up and build up to them. When I look at the X-Men's like Fall of the House of X and Rise of the Powers of 10 comic books, there's so much build-up to those storylines that make it feel like sizable event stories. But I don't think the same is quite true of the Blood Hunt storyline. To be fair, Marvel Comics is actually trying to have a couple series lead up and have a couple plot threads to carry into Blood Hunt. The big one that seems to have a lot of plot threads towards Blood Hunt is Marvel's Blade series. Over the weekend, I did have the chance to go in and check out Marvel's Blade comic from Brian Hill and Elena Casagrande. I really like some of the art across that series, but I think Brian Hill just introduces so many plot twists and doesn't quite stick to some of the source material or the ideas he's come up with. And for me, it's not made for a cohesive reading experience going into Blood Hunt. So at this stage, I want to take a look at some of these tie ins and see if there's any way that I can really be interested and acclimated towards the Blood Hunt storyline. But we're going to go ahead and kick off our stream today by talking about some of my very favorite Marvel comics published across the entire comic book line. Let's go ahead and talk about some of the best X-Men villains created over for Marvel's Krakoa line from the past couple years here. This is a really cool article coming in from David Harth over on CBR.com. The Krakoan era of the X-Men may almost be over, but the last 5 years featured the debut of quite a few memorable villains that might stick around. When I take a look back at all the villains created in the X-Men's line over the past couple years, I'm just in awe of all the different antagonists the franchise has really dreamed up here. It looks like our number 10 selection is none other than Dr. Stasis himself. So Dr. Stasis first appeared over in X-Men issue 1 here. Dr. Stasis rose from humble origins to become the leader of the Orcus Initiative. X-Men was partly sold on the mystery of who Stasis was, and readers were shocked when it was revealed that Stasis was none other than a clone of Nathaniel Essex. Essex had made several clones of himself, all trying to become a Dominion, a godlike being that exists outside space and time. Stasis hated mutants, vivisecting them to create mutants. He took complete control of Orcus and worked with Nimrod, Omega Sentinel, and Fei Long to destroy the power of Krakoa. I think Dr. Stasis has been such an integral part of the X-Men's core comic book line. Plus, watching Dr. Stasis react to Polaris in the latest issue of Follow the House of X was such a joyous moment here and really showed just how integral to the Krakoan line that Stasis has been over at Marvel here. Let's go ahead and talk about our 9th pick. This is Erasmus Mendel. He became the bassist for the latest Nimrod taking place over the X-Men's Krakoan era here. So the first appearance from this character was in House of X issue 1, and of course he has an affiliation over with Orcus. Erasmus Mendel was the husband of Orcus bigwig Dr. Alia Gregor and was the chief of security on the Forge, Orcus's solar orbiting research and development facility. The X-Men learned that Forge was where a Nimrod unit would be made by the station's mother mold at some point in the future and attacked it. The team was successful at destroying the mother mold, although none of them survived the attack. And Mendel was killed in the battle against the team. However, that wasn't the end for Erasmus Mendel. Gregor carried on her work to create a Nimrod and used Mendel's recorded mind as the template for the Ultimate Sentinel. Erasmus isn't the first Nimrod unit, but he's proven to be the deadliest in the modern era. This new Nimrod, along with Omega Sentinel, leads the AI division of Orcus. The two of them are as anti-human as they are anti-mutant, secretly trying to create a new biomechanical race that can join the Phalanx. The unit is known for cracking more and more jokes as the years have gone by, exercising its gallows humor when in battle. I do think that one of the creepiest things about Nimrod is his potential to use humor in some of the X-Men titles. Also, it was really notable how our X-Men team went up against Nimrod in the latest issue of that core series. Also, I think it's been really interesting to see how Dr. Gregor is trying to get revenge on Cyclops due to some of these plot threads here too. Yeah, Rasmus Mendel has been a great character to carry on the torch for the Nimrod character during Marvel Comics' Krakoan era. Next up, we have Dr. Alia Gregor. This character has been so fantastic in Fall of the House of X. I feel like it's really given the X-Men line of titles like a human connection and a human antagonist for Cyclops to go up against here. There was a time during the Krakoan era where Dr. Alia Gregor was considered to be a higher up in Orcus. Aaliyah was a former AIM scientist who wrote the paper that posited the growth of mutant kind would essentially represent an existential threat to humanity, an idea that Dr. Killian Devoe, with some nudging by the time traveling Omega Sentinel, brought to flowering, leading to the creation of Orcus. Gregor joined the group and began working on creating more powerful iterations of the Sentinels, including the Ultimate Sentinel Nimrod. Gregor worked closely with Omega Sentinel and her husband Erasmus, and was able to survive the attack on Forge and several subsequent attempts by Mystique to finish the job. Aaliyah Gregor was successful in creating Nimrod, using her dead husband's mind as its basis, and that was the beginning of her end, of her importance as the others took control of Orcus. Next up, we have Dr. Killian Devoe, who is the head of the Orcus in the early days of Marvel Comics' House of X and Powers of 10 Krakoa series. So the first appearance for Dr. Devoe is over in House of X issue 6. Aaliyah Gregor's paper on Orcus changed the world of secret alphabet societies like SHIELD, SWORD, AIM, Strike, Hydra, and more. Dr. Killian Devoe was a retired Strike operative when he read the paper and made it his mission to follow its percepts to a T. Omega Sentinel came from a future where the mutants had taken stewardship of Earth. She tore out Devoe's eyes and replaced them with cybernetic ones that allowed him to see the timeline she came from. Thus, the seed of Orcus was planted, and that would germinate when Professor X revealed his plans for Krakoa. Devoe recruited the best from SHIELD, SWORD, Strike, AIM, Hydra, Armor, Alpha Flight, and Hammer. Orcus became the most powerful secret agency on the planet with one mission: destroy Krakoa and break the power of the mutants. Devoe was revealed to be an Orcus bigwig at the end of the House of X, and would stick around as a shadowy manipulator throughout the early days of the Krakoan era. Devoe was eventually overshadowed, but the original concept of Devoe and his mysterious connection to the Omega Sentinel made him an intriguing character. Indeed, I think Dr. Devoe was such an interesting character over to Orcus towards the beginning of the Krakoa line of series, although during the fall of the House of X series, it seems like we kind of shifted away and have really gotten into some of the dynamic between characters like MODOK and Stasis. Next up, let's go ahead and talk about Mother Righteous, another clone of Nathaniel Essex that has created so many interesting storylines across comics like Legion of X and Immortal XMen. Readers learn the identities of 3 clones created by Nathaniel Essex during the Krakoan era. Dr. Stasis was the virulently anti-mutant one, and Orbis Stellaris became a creator of living weapons out in the cosmos. The third was the most different of the bunch. Sinister, Stasis, and Stellaris were all clones of Essex, but Mother Righteous was a clone of his beloved wife, Rebecca. While the other 3 clones used their skills with science to become a Dominion, Mother Righteous went in a more mystical direction. Mother Righteous showed up on Arakko and tricked the mutants of Krakoa, offering them boons while feeding off their gratitude. Righteous was able to take control of the Krakoan gates using magic and trick the citizens of Krakoa into believing she was one of them. Righteous was such a more original idea than Stasis or Stellaris, and was a highlight of the 4 Sinisters idea. Mother Righteous's ties towards magic has really encountered the X-Men in some fascinating story scenarios. I really thought it was intriguing how Mother Righteous was kind of working with Jean Grey over in the White Hot Room at Marvel. Plus, some of her ties with X-Men like Destiny and Mystique have really been interesting. Nobody Except Me says, what is this, a list of the best characters in the Krakoan era? It's actually a list of some of the most interesting X-Men villains created in the last 5 years over at Marvel Comics. Appreciate you coming to the stream, Nobody Except Me. So number 6 on our list was Mother Righteous, and number 5 is none other than Tarn the Uncaring. So Tarn the Uncaring was a really interesting antagonist towards the X-Men line of titles. We saw him featured in comics like Sword, as well as X-Men Red. Some of my favorite moments with Tarn definitely took place within some of the issues of X-Men Red. But notably, this character first appeared over in Hellions issue 6. His affiliation is to Arakko's Great Ring. Tarn first appeared when Arakko invaded Earth during Ten of Swords. Tarn was among the most powerful Araki, a powerful genetic mage who had created his own group of powerful mutants, the Locust Vile. Tarn was the lover of Iska the Unbeaten and held a seat on the Great Ring of Arakko, helping lead the warrior mutants. Tarn would keep his seat on the ring after the end of the Great War against Krakoa and verbally sparred with Storm when she took her place on the Great Ring. Eventually, Magneto challenged the genetic mage and wiped the floor with him in the X-Men Red. Magneto lacked the mercy of Storm and he killed Tarn. Taking his seat on the Great Ring, Tarn was like all the Araki, a hardcore and brutal mutant, but he was also a lot of fun to read. He was definitely a jobber, having lost most of his battles, but his powers and tactics made his battles fun to read. Tarn was a shining star in the midpoint of the Krakoan era. I wish I appreciated some of the storylines with Tarn a little bit more in X-Men Red as that series was being published, but I really think there was just so many great moments with that character. Also, Resurrection of Magneto has a couple of really fantastic moments over for the character of Tarn as well. I think Tarn was a really interesting force in X-Men Red towards Storm early on in that series too, because Storm was really surrounded by so many mutants who were so brutal and violent, and Tarn was also included in that mix as well there. Our fourth character is Pog, who first appeared over in the X-Men line of titles during the Ten of Swords storyline with Ten of Swords Stasis #1. I think this article does a fantastic job talking about why this character is so important to Marvel's X-Men continuity. Pog made a splash because of his amazing design. The Krakoan era was full of amazing artists, and the best of them, Pepe Larraz and Marte Gracia, created the designs of the Araki champions, mutants who would battle the X-Men's own chosen swordsmen. Ten of Swords was the first event book of the Krakoan era and the middle part of the story. Ten of Swords Stasis 1 introduced readers to a character that would become a fan favorite, the massive crocodilian swordsman known as Pog. Pog ended up fighting magic during Ten of Swords, but fans didn't fall in love with the character because of what a great, multifaceted villain he was. Honestly, he was barely a character, but he looked awesome, and fans lost their mind over how cool he looked. Pog only appeared a few times, but fans loved him. He was a great-looking villain, and sometimes that's all that's needed. Thankfully, though, Ten of Swords isn't the end of Pog as an antagonist towards the X-Men comics. This character was even featured in a recent issue of the core X-Men series. So I'm hoping that as we get into the X-Men From the Ashes reboot, this is one supporting character who's going to pop up like on a cameo appearance towards like a disparate issue of the series in the near future here. Let's go ahead and talk about Iska the Unbeaten. She first appeared over in X-Men 12. Of course, her affiliation is with none other than Arakko, as it seems like so many of the characters on this list have. Iska the Unbeaten was the sister of Genesis, wife of Apocalypse. Iska joined her sister when Akara split into Krakoa and Arakko, riding Arakko into the other world to battle the demonic hordes of Amenth. Iska fought alongside her sister and the forces of Arakko for a time, but eventually her power kicked in and Iska realized that Arakko would lose the war. She defected to the side of Amenth to triumph against her own people. Iska was chosen to be one of the champions of Arakko in the invasion on Earth, living up to her name by never losing a battle in the contest. Iska remained a thorn in the side of Storm and the X-Men after Arakko and Krakoa joined forces. Iska would often lord her unbeatable status over everyone, leading to several battles with her compatriots on Arakko to keep her unblemished win record. When Genesis returned and dragged Arakko into civil war, Iska decreed herself neutral, taking the mountains of Olympus Mons and Tharsis Montis as her home, killing anyone who came into her realm. So really, Iska the Unbeaten is kind of a wild card amidst the current X-Men continuity here. Her really strong abilities and powers make her a really viable threat for the X-Men. And as you can see across that blurb that we just recently read here, some of her affiliations towards the X-Men, are a little bit loose and can be tested here. So definitely a very interesting character who could produce a lot of interesting plot for the X-Men titles moving forward. Next up, we have Genesis. Genesis was such an important character for the last couple of issues of X Men Red that closed out that just monumental X Men comic book that was last written by Al Ewing and illustrated by Yildiray Cinar. Apocalypse is the former wife of Genesis and just really launched this epic dark fantasy narrative for the last couple installments of that book. She first appeared over in X Men issue 12. Once again, we have a character with the affiliation towards Arakko. Genesis was a native of Akara when she met En Sabanur. The young Apocalypse was something of a teacher, but it was Genesis who taught Apocalypse about the survival of the fittest. Genesis volunteers to take her children and many of the Akarans to battle the demonic hordes of Amenth. They eventually lost, and Genesis surrendered to the more powerful Amenthi, working for the Golden Helm of Annihilation. This would lead her into a battle with Krakoa and Apocalypse. Apocalypse ended up defeating his life while she wore the helm and was forced to wear it himself, but he was able to break its power. Apocalypse joined Genesis and their children on Otherworld, though she eventually turned on him again. Genesis made Apocalypse look like a wimp, which is what made her such a great villain. Genesis was the epitome of the Arakko, of what the Arakko were, and gave readers some pretty amazing stories over the years. In fact, it seemed like the end of X-Men Red even teased that we haven't seen the end of what's next for Genesis. It feels like so many of these storylines, haven't actually been wrapped up towards the final issues of the Krakoan era. And once again, in the X-Men From the Ashes reboot, I really expect Genesis to play some sort of role. She's still a really important character. The final issue of X-Men Red had such a great cliffhanger for both her and some of her children there. So really looking forward to how these characters are used again over in Marvel Comics continuity. Solem is the best of the Arakko. Solem first appeared in Wolverine issue 6. Once again, we have a character with an affiliation towards Arakko, but eventually becoming a solo operator. Solem was born during the years when the Arakko battled Amenth. Unlike the majority of his people, Solem was more about his own aggrandizement and hedonism than anything else, which led to his imprisonment. He was approached to become one of the Arakko's champions and was sent to Hell to get a Muramasa katana from the Beast, the demonic leader of the Hand, which would allow him to kill Wolverine but could also be used to kill him. Solem and Wolverine worked together to get their swords and then battle each other during the contest between the two sides. Okay, this was a really fantastic article. I'm really glad we read this. It's so interesting to see just how much of like the X-Men's Arakko launched so many new ideas for the X-Men comics, during the Krakoan period of titles. I really hope that we see almost all these characters in the next X-Men reboot. While I do want the X-Men to explore something else moving forward, I still want to see all these villains captured in the new context in the next launch of comic books. There's a lot to be excited about here, and I'm really, really interested in how they're going to be able to wind down so many plot threads with just a few more comic books for the main Krakoan era. In fact, let's go ahead and transition directly over to Marvel's last couple solicits for the X-Men's Krakoan line. So Marvel is really dubbing May as the penultimate month for the X-Men's Krakoa line of titles. This to me is just an incredibly epic moment. We've been going with the X-Men's Krakoa stories for years and years now, extending to House of X and Powers of 10. And we've gotten beyond the dual miniseries that are set to close out the era and are finally just getting solicits for some of the last couple installments. Let's go ahead and check out this brand new article coming in from Marvel detailing the solicits and see if we can find any clues about some upcoming launches from the brand new X-Men line of titles as well. Experience the penultimate month of the X-Men's revolutionary Krakoan era. Benjamin Percy's Wolverine run reaches its milestone 50th issue. Mutantkind braces for the final battle against Orcus and more as creators bid farewell to Krakoa. The age of Krakoa is going out on a high note. A period of mutant history unlike any other, the last 5 years of X-Men comic books has boldly reshaped mutant storytelling forever. While the Krakoan gates might be closing, the spirit and the message of Krakoa will live on as the X-Men rise from the ashes this summer with all new titles. I just want to say here as a quick aside, talking about some of my experience with the X-Men comic books, I've definitely had moments where I've been really immersed in the X-Men. Going back to comic books like Grant Morrison's run on the series with Frank Quitely. I've really enjoyed Joss Whedon's run on the series. I really liked what Brian Michael Bendis did towards the opening of his run on the X-Men, but I've never really been that immersed in the property as a whole until the actual Krakoan era. I now am intimately familiar with some of the villains across the entire line, like Omega Sentinel. I've read a little bit of some previous X-Men context, and we've also been covering these X-Men books now for like a year plus over on the channel. So for us right now, it really feels like this closing of the Krakoan era is just so important, to Marvel Comics as a whole. Let's go ahead and check out the next paragraph from Marvel here. Just like how it began, the conclusion of the Krakoan era is currently being told across two epic, interconnected series, Fall of the House of X and Rise of the Powers of Ten. In addition, some of the most pivotal battles, boldest missions, and breathtaking betrayals are taking place in current series like X-Men, X-Men Forever, Cable, and Invincible Iron Man. Meanwhile, Wolverine has been embroiled in a war against his archenemy in the Sabretooth War, just in time for the character's 50th anniversary. This epic storyline in Benjamin Percy's acclaimed run will reach its riveting and viciously violent end in Wolverine 50. The oversized issue will also feature special anniversary stories from legendary Wolverine creators. Okay, so we're going to start reading the solicits here in just a moment. Awesome. Okay, so this is our first issue of the day. This is the final chapter of Marvel Comics' core Cable series. The thing about this title that's really interesting, I would say two major things. First off, it's reuniting the young Cable and the old Cable in Marvel Comics continuity. Plus, it's also tapping some legacy creators over on the X-Men titles. So let's go ahead and explore what Marvel has to say about the end of Cable. This issue, written by Fabian Nicieza, featuring art by Scott Eaton and a cover by Will Sportaccio, on sale May 1st, and this is the fourth issue of a 4-issue miniseries. Time's run out, the Neocracy is at your door. As the fate of the world hangs in the balance, Cable faces both a devastating betrayal and an impossible decision. Will he be able to stem the tides of the Neocracy, or will he and the rest of the Marvel Universe be subsumed? Don't miss out on this explosive series finale. Wish I had a little bit more to say about Marvel's Cable series. I haven't always been following this character over in the Krakoan era, but I do think that watching the older Cable over in the Children of the Vault series and also checking in on the younger Cable in Marvel's core X-Men series has also been a ton of fun. So I'm glad that there's a book that's really spotlighting Cable towards the end of the Krakoan days at Marvel Comics here. A book that I'm a lot more excited about and have been following way more closely is Invincible Iron Man. Watching Tony Stark gather the Mysterium element in the pages of his core series to really craft this new suit of armor has been so much fun. Also, like watching Riri Williams and Forge try and create an assembly line so they can create some robots to counter Orcus's Stark Sentinels have been really interesting. This cover pushes some of those plot threads even further and actually features Iron Man teaming up with Magneto, who was recently brought back to life in Resurrection of Magneto. This is such a cool extension of the X-Men property. Just a month before the entire line is set to close out here, I will always be thankful to the X-Men comics for bringing in Iron Man at the last moment and really just pushing the new Invincible Iron Man into the line in a really interesting way. Let's check out the solicit for the 18th issue of the wonderful Invincible Iron Man series from Jerry Duggan, illustrated by Patch Zurcher, featuring a gorgeous cover over from Cale New. Side by side with Magneto. For years, the Master of Magnetism was Iron Man's greatest fear, but to take down Orcus, will Tony have to work with the X-Men's former adversary? And will a fight against every Sentinel on Earth be too much for even these two powerhouses? I am totally on board with pitting both Iron Man and Magneto against every single Stark Sentinel on planet Earth, especially as Magneto is able to manipulate some of the elements within these Stark Sentinels too. So much cool stuff over in Marvel's upcoming Iron Man series. I think Patch Zurcher is also going to be a really strong artist to capture the really violent scenarios happening in this late stage X-Men comic book as well. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about X-Men 34. I updated the channel art over on our banner with this cover because I think it is just so wonderful over from Joshua Cassara. The amount of X-Men characters laid out across this cover who've just been instrumental to the X-Men line of titles since the 25th issue of the series that really kicked off the Fall of X era over at Marvel is just wonderful and so awe-inspiring, whether it be like Forge's getup over from the Vault, Magneto's new costume after recently returning to life. We also have a reference towards Sync and Talon's relationship here. There's just so many beautiful pieces of character acting, of art, and also just great colors and an aesthetic that really matches the Krakoan era as well. I'm going to go ahead and read the solicit on X-Men 34, written by none other than Jerry Duggan and illustrated by Joshua Cassara. The end is nigh, the Krakoan age is nearly at an end in what might be the final battle of the heroes of Krakoa. One last stop before the fall and rise come to their conclusion and everything changes. So after reading the solicit for the issue and taking a look at the cover, I really thought that this was going to be the last issue of X-Men. I thought for sure that this was going to be the one to close out everything. But towards the very end of this article, they have this final blurb here. Stay alert next month for the announcement of the grand finale milestone issue of X-Men coming in June. So even though a lot of these series are winding down during the month of May over from Marvel, I guess there's still one more super mysterious final issue of X-Men that's maybe going to set up the From the Ashes reboot too. Really cool stuff from Marvel. Fantastic cover. Really want to hand it to both Joshua Cassara and Marte Gracia for showing just what makes the Krakoan line of X-Men titles so cool just on a visual standpoint alone. We have Wolverine 49. Just want to give a shout out to Ben Percy for sticking with this series for so long. This one is also written by Victor Laval, who has really been instrumental to Sabretooth during the X-Men's Krakoan era too. So these are two creators who have contributed so much to the Krakoa line that are just kind of reaping the rewards as Wolverine heads into the milestone issue 50. This one is illustrated by a wonderful Marvel Comics artist, Jeff Shaw. Covers from Lionel Francis Yu. Armor up for the penultimate part of Sabretooth War. Wolverine is powerless but not defenseless. Forge made Logan one last invention, and with the lives of the X-Men and all mutants on the line, it's time to unleash the ultimate weapon. Collector's note featuring the full debut of the adamantium armor. Okay, I was wondering what I was looking at here. I could tell this was a brand new suit for Wolverine. My money was on this being like a new Mysterium suit for Wolverine coming in from Iron Man, but it looks like this is actually a brand new adamantium-powered Wolverine. I do think this is a really cool costume, but it is a little bit extreme and is probably only going to be used very briefly in the core Wolverine series, but definitely a cool piece of continuity and an interesting way to power up Logan here. X-Men Forever. Man, I take one look at this issue, I take one subtle glance in this issue, and I really think I'm looking at the latest issue of Immortal X-Men, especially because we have characters like Destiny, Mystique, and Nightcrawler referenced here. X-Men Forever issue 3 um, is issue 3 of a four-part miniseries still written by Kieran Gillen. This one is illustrated by Luca Maresca and has a cover from Mark Brooks. Now, War in Krakoa, a hunt in the white hot room, and a heartwarming family reunion, by which we mean possibly setting the fire to someone's heart with the flamethrower. Spinning out from Rise of the Powers of 10 and Immortal X-Men comes a must read for the conclusion of the Krakoan Age. Another really cool aspect of this cover that's just coming to surface in my mind right now is the fact that Uncanny Spider-Man and X-Men Blue Origins connected Nightcrawler and Mystique in a different way alongside Destiny. So once again here, it's going to be interesting to see these characters reunite after some of the revelations across the X-Men Blue one-shot over from Marvel as well. Okay, so this one just looks incredibly climactic. I really expected to see Jean Grey on the final issue of X-Men Forever, but it looks like we have none other than Hope featured, maybe with the Phoenix, Shadow of a Phoenix within the background too. Really love the cover coming in from Mark Brooks on this final, really climactic issue of a series that's set to detail some of the final plot threads in the late stage Krakoan series of titles here. Once again, X-Men Forever still written by Kieran Gillen, still illustrated from Luca Maresca, and we have a cover for the issue coming in from Mark Brooks. Our secrets, sinister or otherwise, are over. X-Men Forever ends with the question, after everything, do we have hope or not? From between the pages of Immortal X-Men and Rise of the Powers of 10, the final secrets of the Krakoan Age are revealed here. I think that solicit is written incredibly well. The fact that we introduced the character of Hope in the form of this interesting question here really kind of teases my imagination. Also love the fact that the solicit directly references not only Immortal X-Men, but also Rise of the Powers of 10. Be really interested to see what kind of plot threads from X-Men Forever are going to spill back into Kieran Gillen's series exploring some of the dangers of AI over in the Marvel Universe. Okay, next up, let's go ahead and talk about Fall of the House of X, issue 5. This is the final super climactic chapter of the main series, really detailing the X-Men's battle and counteroffensive against Orcus. This one is really looking to be an exciting issue here, still written by Jerry Duggan, illustrated by Lucas Wernick, and featuring a cover by X-Men Krakoa founding creator here, Pepe Larraz. The battle for the future, it all comes down to this. Orcus versus the X-Men. Winner take the future. Orcus has pushed mutant kind to their lowest point ever, but that just means the X-Men have had to fight back like never before. Will it be enough? We continue to barrel toward the conclusion of the Krakoan Age as these two stories that are one come to an end. I thought the most recent issue of the X-Men's Fall of the House of X was so wonderful. Watching Polaris join together with both Colossus and Wolverine as they attack the Bloom was a really epic storyline. Also, I love the fact that Dr. Gregor revealed more details about the Sentinel City and the secret part of Orcus towards the final chapter. I'm wondering if the appearance of Nimrod on this cover has any reference towards that really interesting plot dynamic that was revealed there in the issue. I also think just the colors on this cover are so wonderful. Watching Storm go toe-to-toe against Nimrod with all this light and effects in the background just looks like something coming directly out of a video game and is so epic to behold here. We have the incredibly epic Wolverine 50. This one, once again, written by Ben Percy and Victor Laval. In addition, we have just the epic comic book creator Larry Hama joining, with more writers that are yet to be announced from Marvel. Also, the art in this one is coming in from Corey Smith, Jeff Shaw, Javi Fernandez, Daniel Picciotto, and more. The cover on this one still illustrated by Lionel Francis Yu.
Highwire554, hey man, just wanted to say I love how you talk about the upcoming comics. Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Honestly, one of my favorite parts is talking about these upcoming series. Nothing makes me more excited than seeing like these brand new covers on upcoming issues, and I just love talking about them and sharing some of my enthusiasm with you. Okay, so Wolverine 50, Creed versus Logan, the final showdown, it's all come down to this. The final battle between Wolverine and Sabretooth. The Sabretooth War concludes the way it began, a violent, bloody battle, but who will be left standing? Plus, special short stories celebrating 50 issues of this run and 50 years of Wolverine, from legendary Logan scribes including Larry Hama, as well as a final send off from Ben Percy and Javi Fernandez and some special surprises. Yeah, I think it's shocking that this Wolverine book somehow made it to 50 issues. It's so rare to see any comic book from the big two hit that, huge milestone. I think it's just so incredibly epic that this book is finally winding down, still featuring Ben Percy at the helm. Also, this adamantium armor, just once again, super cool plot idea, super cool continuity idea. I really hope it's used again later on in Marvel Comics too. Okay, so I really expected to get a big triumphant cover with Jean Grey towards the end of Marvel Comics solicits. I expected to see it on the final issue of X-Men Forever, but it looks like we actually got it on Rise of the Powers of 10, issue 5. This is the last chapter of a 5-issue miniseries, still written by one of my favorite authors in all of comic books, Kieran Gillen, featuring art and cover by the wonderful Luciano Vecchio. The battle for all time. The X epic concludes in a battle between those who are outside time and that which is now and forever. And the result is being decided by whether someone can make the ultimate right choice. The end of the Krakoan age barrels our way as the two series that are one conclude. Highwire554 says, I ain't gonna lie, I hate how Krakoa is coming to an end. The only thing I hate about Krakoa coming to an end is the fact that it is actually coming to an end here. I've had so much fun with this line of titles, and even though I think Fall of X is kind of ready to wrap up here, I'm still kind of in disbelief, mainly because so much of the like artists and writers are kind of changing hands here. The fact that Al Ewing and Kieran Gillen may be leaving the X office is something that I just continue to mourn in each and every one of these streams here. I just think there's something about the way that Kieran Gillen, like and Cy Spurrier, are able to write dialogue that is just so special, so amazing, especially for characters like Destiny, Mystique, and Mother Righteous. I am really hoping that if any of like the incoming X-Men writers are coming to those characters, they're going to have like the background and they're going to know, the accents and the characterization to really make them line up with the Krakoan era to at least make these comics feel a little bit cohesive. I'm really hoping that in the X-Men from the Ashes reboot, we're going to pick up on as many plot threads as we possibly can to make these books feel really, really interesting. That being said, though, I am still so happy with the solicits for these final couple issues of the core series of these books. I think Marvel has done just a wonderful job throughout the entire Krakoa line. I think this series is going to end on a really fantastic note. And I'm just really glad to be here talking about these books right now. When you go back and look at, the X-Men's history and with all the creators and different lines that they had, I think Krakoa is really going to be remembered as one of the best times in the X-Men line of titles, period, end of story. All right, that was a really awesome thing to go ahead and touch on. I'm going to take a quick break here, and then we are going to transition into talking about Marvel's Blood Hunt in a lot of detail. Thank you so much for sticking with me during this stream. We'll be back in just a few moments. Okay, guys, we are back. We are back here. I want to go ahead and address this comment that we have from Highwire 554. Let's see. Highwire 554 says, "I actually had a bucket list of interactions I wanted to see play out during the Krakoan era. Like, for example, I wanted a plot line where Krakoa interacted with Namor. The three plot lines I wanted was Krakoa to interact with Wakanda, another with Namor, and a final one with the Inhumans. Oh man, the Inhumans would have been a really cool way to combine the Marvel Universe. I really think, too, that one really cool aspect of some of these final Marvel Comics issues in the lead up to Judgment Day was how the Eternals got mixed up in that series. I definitely could see like a missed opportunity between finding an interesting way to slot the Inhumans, in the X-Men Krakoa books. One really cool thing that I never expected to see in some of the Krakoa books in Dead X-Men was how like ideas like sword were referenced and used. And then also with just how like Moira popped back up over in that series too. So definitely think that Dead X-Men is using, some of those weird ideas and is really pushing on some of those like ancillary characters in the Marvel universe. I also wanted to say too that, they're not the Inhumans, but I also thought it was really interesting how Dead X-Men referenced the Starjammers too, even though it was a different version of some of those characters in that main series. Okay, really appreciate your comment, Highwire. I think that's just a really good call out on maybe some of the missed opportunities over in the Krakoan line at Marvel. Frankly, I'm not ready to see the Krakoan line, end. So I wonder if Marvel is, or just how they feel about it in general. I want to have a big conversation about Marvel's Blood Hunt. I have tried to allude to the fact that during this stream, there's just something off, something I don't feel that's super cohesive about the Blood Hunt storyline. This is the first issue's cover of the series. Blood Hunt is an event that is coming soon over to Marvel Comics that is really centered around vampire characters. I really like vampires. I really like characters like Blade, who are in Marvel's core universe. I think this cover is so cool. The creative team on Blood Hunt is really, really good, but I still just can't find myself getting immersed in this series or interested to read it at all. I think some of the reason why is the fact that there isn't that much build-up for Marvel's main Blood Hunt storyline. I feel like one of the main books that is set to really inspire or introduce plot threads for Blood Hunt is Marvel's main Avengers book, but Avengers doesn't seem to have nearly anything to do, with the core series here. I was saying a little bit earlier towards the top of our stream that it seemed like there were some plot threads that were referenced from Marvel's ongoing Blade series, especially due to the fact that Blade has been teaming up with Dracula. But I think it's a little bit disappointing that, as opposed to some of the recent Marvel events, this one doesn't have some of that same level of lead up or just kind of follow up into the event to get readers more immersed. Let's go ahead and check out the solicit for the first issue. I know we've read this before on the stream, but I really want to analyze this and see if we can draw any conclusions about the issue from the solicit. The bloodiest Marvel event ever. The skies have gone dark, the sun hiding its face from the carnage to come. The children of the night, the vampires, have risen from the dark in hidden places of the world as one to drown the Marvel Universe in blood. Earth's final night has fallen. Can even the heroes of this doomed world stem the tide of blood that is to come? Join Avengers, Blade, Bloodline, Spider-Man, Hunter's Moon, Tigra, Doctor Strange, and Clea as the dance of death begins in Blood Hunt 1. One of my favorite things too about Blood Hunt is just the eclectic cast that's making up this series. We have like Tigra, and I believe this character is named Hunter's Moon, coming in from the most recent issues of Moon Knight. This solicit here references Clea, who was recently utilized in Marvel's Strange series. We have Black Panther in his super modern outfit from the main series, Captain Marvel too. Iron Man is in his Mysterium outfit. And the way that Blade's like face is portrayed here is really, really cool as well. There's a lot of just interesting kind of like missed opportunity for this book, and I just don't quite know how the creative team is going to be able to utilize it. We have so many tie-ins that were announced for Blood Hunt. Let's see if I'm excited about any of these like individual series and if just any of these tie-in comic books can kind of change my mind about the future of this event series. Okay, so we have this article coming in directly from marvel.com. Let's see here. Give me one moment. Okay, so here is Vengeance of the Moon Knight issue 5. We're going to talk about several of the Blood Hunt tie-ins coming to some of Marvel's biggest comics over in May. I have really been enjoying Marvel's Vengeance of the Moon Knight. I had the chance over the past couple days to catch up on the first 2 issues of that main book. And I do think the way that Jed MacKay has been leveraging the new identity of the Moon Knight character against the previous series supporting cast has been super interesting. The way that Tigra has been psychologically dealing with the absence of Mark as a character is really, really interesting as an ongoing plot thread. Also, seeing how some of the characters of the Midnight Mission are trying to maintain, their real estate with the absence of Moon Knight is also absolutely wonderful. Let's go ahead and check out the solicit for the 5th issue of the series. This one's still coming in from the same creative team of Jed MacKay and Alessandro Cappuccio, with a cover from David Paratore. Cry for the Moon. For the new and vengeful Moon Knight, taking Mark Spector's name isn't enough. And now he turns his sights and fists on everything Mark held dear in life. MacKay has slowly laid the groundwork for the vampire invasion throughout his work on Moon Knight. Don't miss the culmination of years' worth of plotting as the Midnight Mission becomes one of the few havens left during the vampire takeover. This issue really seems to hint that some of the plot threads from Blood Hunt are hiding within the pages of Marvel's Moon Knight book. I'm just going to take one more look over on that series before the next stream and see if I can find any of the plot threads. Frankly, I'm glad we read this and there's a little bit more background before Blood Hunt kicks off in earnest. I think this solicit is super, super interesting. The way that this series has brought Tigra into the mix and just features all this like really heavy emotional content for me is fascinating. If the new Moon Knight turns out to be like one of Mark Spector's alternate personalities, I think his relationship with Tigra is really going to be affected moving forward. We also have the latest solicit from Marvel's main Amazing Spider-Man series. This is the penultimate issue of the comic book that is set to tie into Marvel's Blood Hunt storyline. So as we know right now, Marvel Comics Spider-Man is in the middle of the massive gang war where the characters of the Beetle and Madame Mask are fighting over territories across New York, with the characters of Tombstone and Spider-Man getting caught up in the mix. That series is set to wind down that storyline in some upcoming issues and is set to take on more plot threads with Ben Reilly, Peter Parker's clone as Chasm. I guess that storyline winds down and then Spider-Man moves into this Blood Hunt story for the 49th chapter. I've seen some speculation on my newest video review of Amazing Spider-Man that possibly Norman Osborn could come back for the 50th issue as the Green Goblin. This plot thread has already been teased in some preceding issues of the series too, so I definitely think that's some really good speculation there. Amazing Spider-Man 49, written by Zeb Wells, of course, and it looks like this is another John Romita Jr. issue. Spidey is caught in the fangs of Blood Hunt. Vampires are running rampant through New York City, and while the Avengers are caught in the middle, someone has to take care of the citizens of the Big Apple. That person? Yep, Spider-Man. But if only things were that simple. Things never are, in this issue leads directly into Spider-Man's larger role in Amazing Spider-Man Blood Hunt. I think it's good that there's some kind of like tease or lead into the Amazing Spider-Man Blood Hunt series from the main book. Also, the fact that Marvel's just straight up telling readers that Amazing Spider-Man 49 takes place before the Amazing Spider-Man Blood Hunt tie-in is a really good call out over from Marvel on their solicit too. Man, this Joshua Cassara cover for the latest issue of Avengers is so cool. I think the team that's making up this cover is really fascinating too, with Captain America, Quicksilver, Kate Bishop in Hercules. A new team lineup debuts. With the current Avengers tied up and under siege during Blood Hunts, Captain Marvel calls for aid. And who better to assemble a new team of Avengers than Steve Rogers? Captain America gathers the forces of Quicksilver, Hawkeye, Hercules, and Hazmat to take on hordes of vampires attacking all over the world. And when they encounter an organized army of vampires in a uniform led by a surprise villain, it gets personal. I have to say, there is just so much animosity and trouble that I've had with Marvel's main Avengers book. Some of the plotting and pacing has been so slow, despite the fact that I've enjoyed a lot of what Jed MacKay has contributed to the Marvel Universe on comic books that I've already referenced on this stream, like Moon Knight. I just don't understand why his Avengers run with CF Via isn't clicking with me and why Jed MacKay has plotted the book so slowly. Avengers 14 looks like a massive change for the comic book series that I'm more than willing to embrace. I think this series definitely needs to find a different way to present itself in the material. I think it needs to do away with its really bland main supporting cast of Avengers characters and really find some ways to make it stand out from other Avengers comics. I think throwing characters like Hazmat and Hercules on the team and having, like a more expressive cover from an artist like Joshua Cassara is the right thing to do. I just want to see this series really speed up some of the plotting so I can get more immersed in it. I feel like Jed MacKay has a really good Avengers series in him, and I really want to read that book from Marvel as opposed to the series that we've actually been getting the past few months that has just been really plotting things so incredibly slowly. I recently had the opportunity to check out the latest issue of Doctor Strange. It was absolutely wonderful. But this is the 15th issue of the series, and yet another tie in to the Blood Hunt crossover from Marvel Comics. This one written by Jed MacKay, featuring art by Pasquale Ferry, and a cover from Alex Ross. Doctor Strange the Vampire. Picking up immediately after the shocking events of Blood Hunt 1, Strange and Clea must help the heroes of Earth fight back against the vampire army, but is it already too late for our Sorcerer Supreme? I really like Pasquale Ferry's more imaginative and vibrant art. I think that's going to be a great addition over to Doctor Strange, even though I believe he's illustrated this series in the past here. Also, I think this cover from Alex Ross teases some interesting like genre crossover between Doctor Strange's like occult magic and some of the vampire scenarios held within the Blood Hunt storyline here. So really hoping that this is going to be a strong issue of Doctor Strange moving forward. The idea of Marvel's current Venom series, blending into the Blood Hunt storyline just absolutely destroys my brain. In addition to Venom 33 also being written by Al Ewing, it's actually illustrated by an incredible horror artist who's contributed some wonderful past comics to both Marvel and DC. That is none other than Juan Ferreira. The cover for this series is illustrated by Kafu, who just has such a big relationship on this Venom book. At one point, Kafu was rendering interiors, and now he's on the covers. All right, I want to see just how on earth Venom 33 is tying into Blood Hunt. Vampires sink their teeth into symbiotes. As the earth is smothered in eternal night, Venom unleashes their lethal justice on the hordes of blood-sucking vampires threatening the innocents of New York City. But there's one vampiric foe that thirsts not for blood but for symbiotes. Vampires aren't the only threat the dead now rise. Lee Price, one-time host to the Venom symbiote, has been ripped from his grave, and he's got a bone or a brain to pick with his old partner. Highwire554 says, I'm really starting to get into the Moon Knight comic. Now is the time to do it. Between Blood Hunt referencing all those storylines, the identity of the new Moon Knight character, and just the way that series is written is absolutely tremendous. Really encourage you to stick with that book right now. I think it's probably going to be pretty important to the occult magic side of the Marvel Universe moving forward. This cover, one thing I missed about it is that it's referencing I believe, the Craven storyline over on Spider Man with this Mike Zeck reference. So that's really, really interesting. Also, it looks like Al Ewing is picking up a nugget of continuity with this Lee Price character in introducing him back to the Marvel Universe. I really love it when Al Ewing does that, and I'm just really thrilled to pick up the latest issue of Venom. Fantastic Four 21. I could see a more cohesive way for this book to tie into Blood Hunt that wouldn't destroy like all the momentum. But let's hear what Marvel Solicit has to say about issue 21 of Fantastic Four. Can Marvel's first family formulate a cure? Reed and Alicia are in New York for a day trip to an art museum when suddenly the skies turn black with dark force energy and vampires attack. Everywhere all at once. It's Reed Richards versus the world as he tries to save everyone he can and come up with a cure for vampirism. Vampires are magical, illogical, and impossible. Can Reed come up with a cure? And even if he can't, how is he going to keep all the survivors alive and safe? Can Sue, Ben, and Johnny, all alone in Arizona, keep their families safe? It's a Blood Hunt tie-in you won't want to miss as the Fantastic Four take on a world overrun with vampires. This cover is really capturing my interest from Alex Ross. The way that Alex Ross is able to like illustrate all these elements of Americana while featuring like modern elements of the Marvel universe just creates this wonderful sense of like cognitive dissonance on the page that always pulls me into the narrative. I admit that I haven't checked in with Ryan North's Fantastic Four runs in some of the earliest days, but I think this is actually a pretty solid scenario to pick up of the new issue of Fantastic Four here. I am not really reading the Miles Morales Spider Man series in any way, shape, or form, although it looks like this book is kind of transitioning to reference the Blood Hunt storyline with the character of Blade. One thing I want to say about Miles Morales Spider Man is this book has really been kind of used to just tie into so many of Marvel's events. We also had a big tie in towards the gang war with this story. I believe there was also a really big symbiote storyline that was also tied into the Miles Morales Spider-Man series. So, man, this book has had to deal with so many tie-ins in its very short shelf life, being only 21 issues in here. Okay, let's also go ahead and take a look at this checklist that Marvel also recently announced. So far we have the main series for Blood Hunt, and we also have a reference that the preview is going to be featured in this free comic book day issue that's also set to debut the X-Men from the Ashes storyline. So we just went ahead and took a look at some of the series tie-ins happening for books across the Marvel Universe. For the remainder of our stream, we're going to take a look at all these limited series that Marvel recently announced. We'll probably go through those really fast because, frankly, I don't know if I'm interested in reading each and every one of them. In addition to Blood Hunt just being a 5-issue miniseries, Marvel also announced a red band version of the issue that has a little bit more blood as well. One last thing to say about the Blood Hunt storyline. It looks like this has taken place between May and July at Marvel. July is going to be the second month of the X-Men comics relaunching. So in the middle of Blood Hunt ending, we're going to have all the X-Men comics, in the very first and second issues of their really big runs there. So that's going to be also really, really interesting too. Okay, we're going to rapid fire each one of these Blood Hunt miniseries, and we're going to start off with a Wolverine comic book here. This is Wolverine Blood Hunt. This is a 4-issue miniseries written by Tom Waltz featuring artwork from Juan Jose Rip and a cover with Ben Harvey. I'm not incredibly partial to Wolverine as a character, so the solicit on this one is really going to have to win me over. One thing I can say is Juan Jose Rip's art is just incredibly eclectic. Rip is so great at capturing violence and intense facial expressions. Sometimes Rip's artwork can be way too much for me, but I think Rip is just a great creator to accommodate the character of Wolverine, especially as Wolverine is headed into this more violent scenario at Marvel. Who will bite it? Feast your eyes on Ben Harvey's terrifying Wolverine Blood Hunt 1 cover and stay tuned for more Blood Hunt tie-in announcements. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can find a better description of this issue. Logan fights back the darkness. Wolverine's the best there is at what he does, and today fighting vampires is going to have to top that list. As the sky darkens across the globe and vampires reign, what hidden plots put Logan directly in their crosshairs? Hint, it's nothing like anything you've seen in Blood Hunt yet. Be there as the plot and blood thickens when a secret vampire sect enacts a startling strategy that'll take Logan and the world to the brink, guest starring some surprise characters from Wolverine's past and the return of Luis of the Night Guard. Yeah, I don't think this one is really going to capture my interest or immerse me, but I'm still glad that we went ahead and checked it out and also talked a little bit about where Wolverine is headed in the middle of the Blood Hunt story. Let's take a look at the next tie-in for the series and see if I'm any more excited about it. Okay, next up we have Amazing Spider-Man Blood Hunt. Let's take a look on the creative team of this series. We know that issue 49 of The Amazing Spider-Man is the prelude. This is a 3-issue miniseries written by Justina Ireland, featuring art and cover from Marcelo Ferreira, set to go on sale May 15th. As you can see, it looks like this issue features Morbius, a really interesting Spider-Man character. But is Morbius himself enough to merit me reading an entire Spider-Man miniseries? I would say not. Let's see what kind of plot threads the creative team is exploring on Amazing Spider-Man Blood Hunt and see if they can win me over. Spider-Man will be tasked to find his iconic vampiric villain in Amazing Spider-Man Blood Hunt, a new tie-in series spinning out of McKay and Larraz's Blood Hunt crossover. Written by Justina Ireland and drawn by Marcelo Ferreira, Spider-Man Blood Hunt will see Spidey team up with Misty Knight and the Lizard to rescue Morbius, who has already fallen into the vampire overlord's clutches. Let's see here. Spidey's mission in Blood Hunt has become clear, and of course, it involves his old friend Michael Morbius, after he discovers the importance of his famed foe in the vampire's overall plans. Peter will have to decide if he needs to take him out or save him. Yeah, I don't know if some of the plot threads for this one seem that interesting either. I believe I do enjoy Marcelo Ferreira as an artist here, but it really feels like Marvel is publishing a lot in terms of Blood Hunt, and I don't know if this is the series that's really going to stand out, judging from some of the plot threads we've already read over in that article for the main series. Let's go ahead and check on the next tie-in here. We have Dracula Blood Hunt. So here is Dracula Blood Hunt coming in from Marvel. This one is written by Danny Lore, featuring artwork from Vincenzo Corratu and a cover by Rod Rice. So for me, I think this is actually one of the most exciting Blood Hunt tie-ins, period. Danny Lore, really interesting creator at Marvel. I really like that Bloodline comic book. I've also really been raving about Vincenzo Corratu as a creator. The Astonishing Iceman miniseries from Marvel that Corratu lent some artwork to was wonderful. I also really love some of Karatu's work over on Marvel Comics' Dead X-Men. I also think Rod Rice is a wonderful creator. This cover for me is a lot more interesting than some of the other ones we've seen. So it looks like this tie-in is an absolute winner for me. Let's go ahead and read a little bit about some of the plot threads that Danny Lore as well as Karatu are taking on for this Dracula comic. Dracula's pivotal role in Blood Hunt will play out in Jed MacKay and Pepe Larraz's main series and Dracula Blood Hunt, a special 3-issue tie-in series by writer Danny Lore and Vincenzo Corratu. Dracula Blood Hunt will see the Lord of Vampires team up with none other than the daughter of his greatest nemesis, Bloodline, the daughter of Blade. This solicit also calls out Marvel's main Blade series, which is also teaming up Dracula, with Blade as well. So it really feels like that one is also going to be a really important series, setting up a lot of plot threads for this Dracula storyline. That's so interesting to me that in terms of all of Marvel's limited series, it's looking like Dracula is going to be the winner here. Let's see if any of these other tie-ins can buck the trend. Okay, here is Blood Hunters #1 coming in from Marvel. This one is set to be a 4-issue limited series, and that actually features a great creative team. We have Mark Russell, Christos Gage, and Erica Schultz writing this comic book series. I really like Mark Russell's sense of humor. I'm wondering if any of it is going to come to the surface for the Blood Hunter story. Christos Gage is always a great assist for Dan Slott with some of his scripts. I've also liked what I've read from Erica Schultz, and I believe some Amazing Spider-Man stories too. Let's learn about what some of the plot threads and characters these creative teams are taking on for the Blood Hunters story. So it looks like Mark Russell and Bob Quinn are taking on a Hawkeye storyline. Hawkeye is on the run, but does he have enough trick arrows in his quiver to avoid both the long arm of the law and vampires out for his blood? See Clint band together with a group of civilians in a pulse-pounding story by Mark Russell and Bob Quinn. I really do think that one should be exciting. I'm really hoping that Mark Russell will be able to lend a little bit of humor amidst a storyline that feels a little bit pedestrian, with Hawkeye just fighting some vampires, essentially. Man Wolf and J. Jonah Jameson do a little father-son bonding, while also fighting for their lives against a horde of bloodsuckers. It's a new chapter by one of the oddest family dynamics in the Marvel Universe by Christos Gage and Javier Garren. You know what? This is really weird, because I would think that if we had a storyline about Man Wolf and J. Jonah Jameson, that Mark Russell would be writing that storyline and it would be filled with a lot of weird humor. I would also probably pair Mark Russell with Javier Garren for that storyline as well. I am interested to see what Christos Gage could bring to that, but I'm a little disappointed that Marvel didn't give Mark Russell the humor scenario for the Blood Hunter story. All right, so our final chapter in this series is written by Erica Schultz and Bernard Chang. This one is set to be a multi-part story for Cloak and Dagger. With Cloak missing in action, Dagger strikes out in search of new and surprising allies. Witness the genesis of Marvel's wildest team yet, the Blood Hunters, and the start of a multi-part story by Erica Schultz and Bernard Chang that will run across all 4 issues. Who will Dagger recruit? You'll have to wait and see. I want to read this quote over from Erica Schultz just because I think it's interesting. It's really exciting to write Dagger and see her assemble a team of fantastic Fang hunters. You're going to love how the dynamic between these characters and see where the drama is. It's an honor to be contributing to Blood Hunters and the Blood Hunt event, and to collaborate with Erica Schultz, who's crafted a bloody exciting story, and the masterful magician Marcelo Maiolo, whose color work is amongst the bloody best in the medium, Bernard Chang added. I hope the work will live up to fan expectations, as well as those of previous creators who have tackled the very same characters when I was reading and collecting comics in my teens, like the legendary Rick Leonardi and Mike Vosberg. Wow, what a cool quote over from Bernard Chang, referencing some of the key and instrumental comic book creators that contributed to some of these characters in times past. Yeah, I think I'm really excited about the Blood Hunters tie-in for Marvel's Blood Hunt 2. All right, what is next? We have Black Panther Blood Hunt. All right, Black Panther Blood Hunt is written by Cheryl Lynn Eaton, featuring art by Farid Karami. And take a look at that cover from Andrea Sorrentino. That's amazing. The use of the dark negative space is just profound, violent, and absolutely horrifying. This one is on sale May 29th. It's a 3-issue limited series. T'Challa the Vampire. Black Panther has been transformed and tasked with carrying out a key mission. But even a dark transformation won't keep him from his duties to Wakanda. For better or for worse, see the horror that awaits T'Challa yourself on Andrew. Oh my goodness, Marvel Comics website accidentally spelled Andrea as Andrew. Andrea Sorrentino's Black Panther Blood Hunt #1 cover. Yeah, on this one, I'm not really sure. I especially don't like to judge Black Panther comics before reading them because usually they're so immersive and feature so much content. So this one, I'm just going to give a wait and see verdict for. The next tie-in that we have is Marvel Comics' Strange Academy, which is also leaning into the Blood Hunt series. I haven't read a single issue of this book, and I think it's a little bit too intimidating for me to pick up on this just in time for the Blood Hunt. But really quickly, let's just call out the creative team on this series. Strange Academy Blood Hunt is a 3-issue miniseries written by Daniel Older, featuring artwork from Luigi Zagaria and a cover by Umberto Ramos. Let's see, give me just a few moments and then we will kick into some of our last tie-ins over for the Blood Hunt. Marvel is returning to the Midnight Suns property just in time for the Blood Hunt 2. We have a 3-issue main series written over by Brian Hill, featuring art by German Peralta and a cover by Ken Lashley. I have to say, even though I haven't been enjoying all of Brian Hill's writing on the core Blade series, I think the fact that Marvel's teaming him up with German Peralta and giving covers from Ken Lashley on the main Midnight Sun series could definitely lead to a really good and cohesive comic book here. I don't think this is going to blow anybody's mind when it comes out, but it could really be a solid issue of Marvel's Blood Hunt tying into the main series. Who will bite it? Get a glimpse at the epic showdown between Blade and Ghost Rider on Ken Lashley's Midnight Suns Blood Hunt 1 cover, and stay tuned later today and all week long for more Blood Hunt announcements. Okay, we're going to go ahead and shoot into our very final Blood Hunt tie-in that we have to talk about on this stream, and thankfully I was saving a really exciting one as well, as this last one is set to cover on the really obscure character in the Marvel Universe known as Union Jack. So this is Union Jack the Ripper, Blood Hunt #1. It's once again here a 3-issue limited series written by Kavan Scott, featuring art by Kev Walker and a cover by Ryan Brown. So I've experienced some of Kev Walker's art before on Marvel's main Thunderbolt series, but I don't know if I've ever read a Kavan Scott comic book. I believe he's done some other work for Marvel in the past. Yeah, Union Jack, very obscure character over in the core Marvel universe. I want to read a little bit more about how Union Jack is set to tie into the rest of the Blood Hunt. When Blood Hunt kicks off in May, vampires will emerge from the shadows to stake their claim on Earth. But around every corner of the Marvel universe is a superhero ready to fight back the hordes. The fate of the United Kingdom will be placed in their flag-bearing hero Union Jack, who upgrades himself into a one-man vampire-slaying army in Union Jack the Ripper Blood Hunt, a 3-issue tie-in event series written by New York Times best-selling author Kavan Scott and drawn by acclaimed Marvel artist Kev Walker. Scott and Walker will deliver a Union Jack story you've never seen before as the iconic British hero armors up, grabs his trusty Webley pistol, liberates a medieval longsword, straps on grenades, and heads out to slaughter the blood-sucking masses in a way that would make the Punisher envious. Union Jack's solo mission will place him at war with a specific brood of vampires targeting his homeland, all led by a mysterious villain known as the Hunger. It's going to be more brutal than anything we've seen from Union Jack, as his methods switch the ferocity of an empowered enemy, Scott shared. Working with Kev Walker on this book is a dream, as we both embrace our love of horror in every panel. It's not going to be just a gore fest for all involved. The miniseries will be asking some big, heartfelt questions appropriate for any character who wears his country's flag on his chest. What does this mean when everything you love and believe in is turned on its head? When everything you've always taken for granted shifts beneath your feet? I feel like what makes Union Jack the Ripper an interesting series could have to do with the supporting cast and also how Union Jack is able to interact with the people around him. I am really interested in checking this one out. I feel like we have a really solid group of characters here, too. Afro SF is chiming in with some additional context. Let's go ahead and check out your comment. Thanks for showing up over in the stream. Greetings, Arakko Braddock. I love Union Jack. He was in the Union miniseries, which was superb, and a tie-in to King in Black. Awesome. That is a great call out here. Sometimes, really, I think one of the best aspects about these Marvel event series like Blood Hunt is they give, comic book creators a chance to toy with some off the beaten path characters like Union Jack. So once again, here, so happy that Marvel is really taking the opportunity to feature, Union Jack in his own miniseries as a part of this really eclectic Marvel Comics event series, alongside some of the tie-ins like Blood Hunters, as well as that new Avengers series. I think these are some of the books that I am most looking forward to here. I think that is just about all the Blood Hunt tie-ins that I can handle over for one stream. Let's go ahead and close everything out for the day over with the latest installment from Marvel's X-Men Monday, coming in over from Adventures in Poor Taste. I absolutely love reading this article, previewing some upcoming Marvel Comics art, as well as sitting down with some of Marvel Comics editorial and talking about what some of the brand new plot threads are coming over from upcoming X-Men series. Looks like this one is focused on some of the romance across the Krakoan line of titles as well. So let's go ahead and talk about the Valentine's Day special 2024 X-Men Monday, coming in from Chris Hassan. Welcome, X-fans, to another uncanny edition of X-Men Monday at Adventures in Poor Taste. It's here, my favorite time of the year, Valentine's Day. The holiday itself I could care less about, but the opportunity it presents to ask creators ridiculous questions about the X-Men's messy personal lives and character flaws, that's the type of thing that makes my heart swell with joy. So it looks like Adventures in Poor Taste is starting off here by talking to X-Men editor Jordan White. They say, welcome to 2024 X-Men Monday Valentine's Day special. In your opinion, what is it about the X-Men franchise that makes it such fertile ground for iconic romantic moments, heartbreak, messy love triangles, fan shipping, and so on? If you ask me what makes the X-Men such a ripe franchise for romance, my answer to you would just naturally be that long-form storytelling really lends itself towards long-term relationships. So the idea of Rogue and Gambit, being next to each other for such a long time, and then finally, after years of build-up, tying the knot very recently in Marvel Comics, I think really gives readers a strong sense of dopamine. I'm curious to see how Jordan White is going to answer the question. In thinking about the X-Men, and specifically in conversation with Annalise Blissa a few years back, we came to a bit of a revelation that it's a school, but where the classes are not really at all the important bits. The important bits are self-actualization and found family. X-Men is kind of about going to college, and what is going to college without some serious soap opera drama and romance? I feel like Jordan White didn't shout out any of my answer at all, but instead told, his own kind of like personal story about how he interprets the drama within the X-Men franchise. Drew Baumgartner says the X-Men's high school origins makes it a logical hotbed for young love, both the positives and negatives. Obviously, some mutants are too old for that sort of thing, and the franchise only sometimes shifts into that teen soap opera gear. But I don't think there's a way to throw a bunch of hormonal teams together and not have some amount of romantic drama bubble to the surface. Russell Dowderman is one of my favorite artists at Marvel Comics. He's really illustrated some beautiful work recently on the Scarlet Witch property. Dowderman says, I think X Men is at its heart a soap opera. Part of what makes the X Men franchise, to me, is the relationships. You come for the powers and fights and narrative about mutants protecting a world that hates and fears them, but you stay for the romances, family dynamics, friendships, and drama. Okay, I think that actually reflects some of our answer too, because I do think that in terms of long-term storytelling, what really matters at the end of the day isn't really the plot, but it's some of the core relationships within the main book. I really love X Men writer Kieran Gillen's answer. He states, I don't think we need to bust Hickman out of retirement to make a data page to explain this one. Hotties, so many hotties. I think as we've read a lot of Kieran Gillen and Christopher Cantwell's responses, we've really seen just how ironic they are in answering so many of these questions. I'm going to keep my guard up as we read Christopher Cantwell's answer to this question. Because of all the characters, no matter who they are able to strike a pose like they belong on the poster for the John Hughes movie Some Kind of Wonderful. There is no class for Smolder at the Xavier School. It's a requirement for admission. Jerry Duggan, writer of X-Men, says those living closest to the edge of life-death live the best and most exciting lives. Philip Sevy, when you're living in an act of defiance, every action you take is threatened by the outside world. So the choice to love and be loved is radical and revolutionary. Those stakes heighten all relationships and make them dramatic and powerful, and beautiful and tragic in everything that they can be. The combination of soap opera and persecution makes for an incredible ongoing saga of love and heartbreak. It sounds so silly, but I think the way that Philip Sevy said this is just so poignant here. The idea of progressing a relationship between two friends to have like a romantic interest really can just pay off so much characterization in the scope of a comic book. And I think that's one of the things that really keeps X Men readers sticking around for the long term over on the franchise. Also, like one thing about the Krakoan era too that's been so important to me is that since we got the focus on character relationships like Jean Grey and Cyclops, as well as Talon and Sync, so many creators have just featured, mild commentary talking about the bonds of these creators or the bonds of these characters and just, how they've been recontextualized in the Marvel Universe. Like, I think a better way to say what I'm trying to say here is that over in Immortal X-Men, Kieran Gillen really utilized the relationship between Hope and Exodus in so many different ways, whether it be in the context of Sins of Sinister or in the post Sins of Sinister version of the Marvel Universe. Having relationships is just a great way to reference the fact that character relationships are progressing in terms of the X-Men and in the Marvel Universe. Jordan Blum says, when staring down when staring down at tomorrow full of sentinels, brood eggs, and sinister clones, you gotta love hard and love fast. X-Men starts as a boarding school drama. Romance and heartbreak are baked into its foundation. Jason Liu, really interesting new and recent creator to Marvel. Jason Liu, the X-Men is the original Temptation Island, but all the contestants have superpowers. They're all hot and sexy individuals under one roof. And on missions, when they're wearing tight, revealing outfits, how can they not take a glance at their teammates and not have certain feelings? And their annual swimsuit parties, maybe that was more frequent in the Krakoan era. Jay Jordan. Ironically, the mutants' humanity and the very human desires to love and be loved make it so much fun to watch them battle giant robots and then battle heartbreak at home. The comic started with everyone having a damn crush on Jean from the beginning. It's been a bit of a soap opera. Also, spandex and proximity, the idea of a marginalized group of people dealing with their very insular romantic issues, appeals to so many queer X-Men fans because that's just an undergrad theater department. Okay, very cool to see Steve Folks chiming in here, the writer of Dead X-Men and Dark X-Men most recently at Marvel Comics. Steve Folks has done a wonderful job detailing the romance between Havoc, Alex Summers, and Madeline Pryor. I really want to see how he's going to answer this one. The practical answer is that it's rarely an ensemble project where the primary actors usually live together and rarely have solo books requiring their real story to happen elsewhere. The cheekier answer is that Chris Claremont set the Randy romantic risk template and we've all followed in his footsteps. Fantastic answer. I love Steve Folks' answers to these X-Men Monday questions. He always finds like ways to tie back like Marvel Comics continuity and how other writers write into some of these ideas. Okay, cool. I definitely am interested in hearing Al Ewing talk about this. Once again, Al Ewing ties in Chris Claremont, and just like a good student of the Marvel Universe, references the people that came before. I think Chris Claremont did a favor for everyone in that regard. At the point X-Men really needed to come out swinging, he was the right writer at the right time with the right passions, obsessions, and skills, including a serious talent for high emotional drama that grabbed readers who maybe weren't expecting that from a comic at the time and never let go. This carries on throughout all his artistic collaborators, very much greats themselves. In a run that goes on long enough and that he's just planting seeds for, the rest of us will come back to forever. He's changed and enriched the soil, everything grows on. Anthony Oliveira, when I was a kid, I read an anthology of X-Men short stories to pieces, and it was introduced by Stan Lee. I've never forgotten what he said. The secret to the X-Men is that it's only pretending to be a superhero story. It's actually a soap opera. I think that's a key truth really unlocked by Roy Thomas in those early years of glorious mod outfits and sweaty dating troubles. And once Claremont comes on board, it's never looked back. So many people, I think, miss this point in the X-Men comics, and that's that Roy Thomas kind of unlocked the path for Chris Claremont to walk in that core comic book. Love the fact that Anthony Oliveira is referencing the past, even extending beyond to what Chris Claremont rendered in terms of Marvel's X-Men world. Let's see what else Oliveira has to say. The X-Men are so much about romance because the X-Men are so much about community. How do we relate that to each other? How do we relate to the outside world, and how does that outside world relate to us? Romance is one of, though not the only crucible where the questions are examined. Do we share the same values? Can we live a life together? Where do you and I intersect, and where do we differ? Okay, I want to read this a little bit quicker here. Adventures in Poor Taste. Who is the romantic X-Men character and why? Christopher Cantwell says Xavier. Everything originates from his sexy bald head and his eyebrows that are constantly reaching outward for a better world. He dashes his heart and the hearts of others repeatedly in service of a dream. What's more romantic than that? Watching the rise of Professor Xavier in some of the recent issues of Rise of the Powers of 10 has been a ton of fun and is also really kind of unlocked, I think, a little bit of what Christopher Cantwell is saying and what the big Professor X is all about here in the first place. Philip Sevi says, Wolverine, no doubt. Look, he's not exactly the most conventionally attractive person in the group, nor with a sparkling personality. And yet, that dude gets more action than any other character. He's got to just be a Casanova. Al Ewing says, I think Havoc, it takes a lot of work to sub on his level. Really interesting commentary from Al Ewing. I would love to see Al Ewing maybe write a future Dark X-Men comic book too. Jerry Duggan, truly, this changes for me all the time. I guess I really would have been welcomed on Krakoa. Right now it's Emma, but it rarely has been during my time in this chair. Russell Dodderman says Cyclops. From his earliest characterization, he was in love with Jean. They went from high school sweethearts to co-leader of the X-Men, and Jean being the only one who can judge him. And when Jean was gone, Scott fell in love with Madeline and later Emma. He seems like a romantic relationship guy. Yeah, I guess so. It seems like Cyclops is always in love with somebody. Steve, folks, my gut instinct is Storm, because she gives herself so fully to the romantic entanglement she chooses, but she doesn't need a partner. While there are more overt flirts and Lotharios among the X-Men, I feel like Aurora strikes the perfect balance of loving herself, but being able to intensely, passionately love others who are good enough to deserve it. Really interesting commentary. Right now, Storm is in a relationship with Craig Marshall. I don't think it feels to me like Storm is totally throwing herself at her relationship with Craig, but there's definitely been some great moments there. Jordan Blum says Mystique, a willingness to burn the world to the ground in the name of love, is the ultimate romantic gesture, and she still has love to spare for both her children, Rogue and Nightcrawler. Jay Jernan, Mystique was willing to burn down everything on Krakoa to get her wife back. I don't think it gets more romantic than that. Let's see. I want to see Kieran Gillen's answer. He said, Beast and the timeline where my sword got past issue 5 would have been good for this. But the timeline we ended up in had somewhat less romance interest in Beast. Perhaps someone could go back in time and try to do something about it. We have to time travel to save Beast. Why? It is all his genocides. No, he has to carry on devotedly making blueberry muffins. Tom Brevoort, back in the day it was the Beast, before he threw over human needs and desires in favor of science. Nightcrawler also has some moves, but he doesn't use them often anymore. These days, Gambit is the clear winner. Angel wants to be, but he's mostly all talk. Gambit thinks about this stuff. All right, I want to go ahead and preview some of the final panels, setting up the future of some of these X-Men comic books. Let's go ahead and dive to the end of this X-Men Monday article. Perfect, here we go. Okay, so it looks like this is a preview for the upcoming Rise of the Powers of 10-2 preview, detailing what's going on with Cyclops behind the scenes over during Fall of the House of X as he's captured by Orcus in Paris. I'm thinking that this panel could definitely be a reference to a future issue of the core X-Men series. It's looking to me like a Phil Noto illustration with Emma Frost mind controlling somebody. Looks like this panel is showcasing Cable, most likely a reference to the core Cable's miniseries being published over at Marvel that we took a look at earlier. Oh, and this was a panel, I believe, from the last issue of Fall of the House of X, showing Omega Sentinel getting ready to off Cyclops, and Cyclops still being convinced, that the vision of Jean Grey is still set to save him in some scope or capacity. Really, really great panel here. Okay, it looks like this is probably a future issue of Dead X-Men. It looks like Ascani is projecting herself and speaking to our team of Dead X-Men characters, maybe about the next alternate reality they're set to explore to go find the character of Moira. Looks like we have a future panel from Resurrection of Magneto. Man, what an ominous panel here coming in from Luciano Vecchio. Just really displaying an ominous look over at Magneto's backside here. Perfect. Okay, so that was the end of Adventures in Poor Taste's X-Men Monday article. It is also going to be the end of our stream today. I want to thank you so much for just sticking with me and hanging out during the entire stream here. I want to encourage you to go ahead and like the stream and subscribe to the channel. Also, we'll be back on Monday for a brand new DC Comics review. Plus, we'll be following that up with some new Marvel material over on Wednesday. Plus, this weekend, we'll have some brand new streams. Thank you so much for hanging out with me this weekend, and just hope you have a great Sunday here. Thanks so much.